you ever read a book that made you want to lace up your boots, or trail runners, and start walking? Or maybe you've been halfway along a trail and something you read comes back to you, clearer and deeper because now you're actually living it. I've walked several Caminos and I've got another one planned this summer. I've also spent time on long distance trails in the UK, and I walk daily with my dogs. Over time, certain books have really stayed with me before, during, and after those journeys. And today I want to share with you 10 books that have had an influence on the way that I walk. The first book is The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. It's not technically a book about the Camino, well, it isn't, but it captures something very close to it. This is a true story that demonstrates how powerful walking can be when processing through loss. So it's about Raina and her husband Moth, and they walk the southwest coastal path in the UK after losing everything and one of them facing a devastating medical diagnosis. The trail that they embark on is Britain's longest national trail, and it's 630 miles long. I've walked some sections of this trail myself, and I do plan actually to walk some more of it this summer in Devon and Cornwall. And Raina's descriptions of the wild weather, the silence, the ache in your legs, it all rings true. And now actually this book's been made into a movie starring Gillian Anderson, who played Dana Scully in The X-Files, and she also played Margaret Thatcher actually in The Crown. So I'm really excited to see this movie as it's being released in the UK cinemas in a couple of weeks. But I'm really glad that I read the book first because it just feels so personal when you're reading it in the author's voice. By the way, as I go through these books, I've left links to all of them in the description below if you want to check any of them out. Okay, so the second book, another true story that stayed with me and was actually one of the stories that sparked my interest in walking in the first place and made me think that maybe the Camino or another long distance trail is something that I could do. And this is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. After the death of her mother, Cheryl sets off on the Pacific Crest Trail in the States, completely unprepared, both physically and emotionally, and all her gear actually. She had a lot of gear, but it wasn't necessarily the right gear. And her honesty and how she processes her trauma during her walk is what makes this book so powerful. Of course, not everyone who decides to walk a long distance trail walks to process major trauma or something big. But I do think that Wild resonates because it reminds us that walking can give us the space to slow down, reflect and reconnect with ourselves, whatever we're carrying. And also the blisters, the fear, the memories. If you've walked alone for any length of time, you may relate to some of the things within her story. So Wild was made into a film again in 2014 with Reese Witherspoon playing Cheryl. And it is a great watch, but again, you may want to start with the book. By the way, if you've read any of the books that I'm mentioning, please do drop a comment below and tell me which ones, and just tell me your thoughts on them as well. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So this is a Camino book. A Pilgrim's Guide to the Camino Inglés by John Brierley. On my last Camino de Santiago walk in Spain, I took this book with me, and because I was walking the Camino Inglés. And I'm really glad that I did because it's so lightweight. And actually the John Brierley guidebooks are all so helpful because they've got suggested stages marked out, they've got maps, they've got elevation gains, information about all the places that you'll pass through on the way. But this book also and the other guides as well, also highlight alternate routes. And one day, guidance in this book actually helped me walking alongside a really busy road, and instead I was able to take a much more peaceful country lane. And without this book, I would have missed that entirely because it wasn't actually signposted. But the most popular guidebook by John Brierley is probably this one, number 4, A Pilgrim's Guide to the Camino Frances. And this is the classic Brierley guide. So the Camino Frances is a longer route, and as such this book is thicker than the previous book. You can see there the difference. I did have this book with me for the first week that I walked the Camino Frances, and my husband and daughter were with me at the time, but then they were returning home and I actually gave them the book to go back with them because of the weight. And I know it's not very heavy, but you are really conscious of what's in your pack, and especially a week into the walk. But many pilgrims do keep it with them throughout the whole walk. And even if you read it before setting off, it's really helpful for understanding the route, not just the logistics, but the spiritual and the historical context too. And it can help you kind of plan your route if you want to do that. Some people just want to set off walking and not have a guidebook, and that's totally fine. John Brierley actually also has, I know he's, rest in peace John Brierley, because I know he's no longer with us, but there is also a John Brierley guidebook, a shorter version if you're walking from Sarria to Santiago. So obviously that's a section of this trail, so I guess the book is probably about that thick, but I can leave a link to that in the description below. So while many books focus on preparing for the Camino, book number 5 is Returning from Camino by Alexander John Shea. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. Let's go with Shea. And this book addresses the equally important journey of returning home after you've finished your walk or your Camino. And it provides insights into integrating the transformative experience of pilgrimage into your daily life. So it draws from his background in anthropology and psychology. And he actually presents a framework for pilgrims to help process the impact of the journey. And he emphasizes that the end of the walk doesn't actually mean the end of the pilgrimage. It's actually like a transition into a new period of personal growth. So if that's something that might interest you, you might want to check that book out. Okay, let's move on to another autobiography. And this one is again about the Camino. And this is Boots to Bliss by Claude Tranchant. And Claude walked from Vézelay in France all the way to Murcia in Spain alone at the age of 64. And her self-published book, Boots to Bliss, is thoughtful, it's honest, and it's full of quiet strength that comes from long-distance walking. It's not dramatic or overly polished, it's just real. And it's just one woman walking, reflecting, and slowly transforming with every step. I love books like this, as they show that you don't have to be a young man to be an adventurer and embark on an epic journey like the Camino. As a woman who is now over 50, I actually find this to be really inspiring. Speaking of how society has often portrayed expectations on others, my next book, number 7, it's not a walking book, it's The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. Although it's not a walking book, this book has in some ways changed how I think about walking and life in general. So through her experience of caring for palliative care patients, she shares some of the top regrets that people have in the end stages of their life as a way of encouraging herself and others to live differently and regret-free. One of the regrets she writes about is, "I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me." And that line has really stuck with me. No one expected me to leave the country and my responsibilities for 6 weeks to walk across Spain. And yet I broke free of the glass case of society's expectations and chose to do something that was true to me, something that I needed to do. And so much of what draws us to long walks or pilgrimages is the urge to live more truthfully, to let go of what doesn't fit and walk towards something that does. If you haven't yet walked the Camino or a long distance trail, but it's something that you feel inspired to do at some point, but it just seems so far off at the moment, you might find this next book helpful. So this is book number 8, which is 52 Ways to Walk by Annabelle Streets. And this is a lovely book with 52 short chapters. And each chapter outlines a different way of thinking about walking. Walking barefoot, walking in the rain, walking at night, all with small, simple ideas for bringing variety to your walks. And I would say that this book is a reminder that walking doesn't have to be epic, actually, to be meaningful. Even everyday walks with my dogs can feel new, and it just depends on how you approach them. Okay, so book number 9, Wanders, A History of Women Walking by Kerry Andrews. This book was gifted to me by a friend, but unfortunately, one of my dogs, who was a puppy at the time, he's still quite young, has eaten the corners of it. I don't know if you can see that. That corner's quite bad. So yeah, unfortunately he chewed some of the corners. But anyway, this book counters the narrative that the most famous walkers in history are men, because a lot of the writing has been about men. For example, this book here, I'm not talking about this one particularly, but this book here, A Philosophy of Walking by Frederick Gross, is a really famous book. It's a great book, but all of the people that he talks about are men. So what I love about this book is that it's inspired by women across centuries. Some like well-known authors like Virginia Woolf, but others are overlooked figures like the 18th century parson's daughter called Elizabeth Carter that no one will have heard of. And the thing that all the women in this book have in common is that walking was an essential or is an essential part of who they are. Some of them are still alive. So although my copy is now quite chewed, I'm still reading it, nibbled pages and all. Okay, so just before I mention the final book, which is a great book suggestion and not very well known, so you'll definitely want to stay to find out about it. But I did just want to say that I am trying to grow my YouTube channel. This honestly is a challenge, with wanting to be out in the hills walking when I can and with juggling a job and family life. But I am committed to growing it and documenting my hikes. So please do help me out just simply by pressing that like button, because that gives an indication to YouTube that people are engaging with my videos and it'll actually throw them out to more people, or so I believe. So that would really help me. And actually, if you want to check out some of my videos, I'll put a link to 2 playlists below as well. So one is a Camino preparation playlist and the other is a playlist which has videos of my walks. So I'll drop those again in the description below. Okay, let's move on to the final book. The final book is this one, number 10, Britain's Pilgrim Places by Nick Mayhew Smith and Guy Hayward. And this is a beautifully photographed guide to pilgrimage routes and sacred sites around the UK. And it includes short walks as well as long distance trails from cathedrals to ancient holy wells. And it's inspired me to get out and see some of those ancient sites in my local area and beyond. The book is quite large and heavy, so it's not something that you would carry in your pack necessarily, but it's inspiring to read at home or even keep in the car during a road trip in the UK. And it's opened my eyes to some places that I'd never even heard of, and some of them very close to home. And it made me realise actually how much pilgrimage is woven into the British landscape. So even if you are not going to be visiting Britain anytime soon, it's still such a beautiful book that if you enjoy reading about history, pilgrimage and ancient places and enjoy stunning photography, then you may enjoy reading this beautiful book. So none of these books are about going faster or further. They're about walking with intention, noticing more, and allowing yourself to change a little with every step. So if any of these books speak to you, as I say, I've left links to them all in the description below. But really, this isn't about buying books. It's about finding stories that work alongside you just when you need them most. If you enjoyed this video, you may wish to check out this next one here.